Hi class. We walked through frequencies and the mean, median, and mode in the lecture video, but as I mentioned in the video, it's often helpful to hear an explanation of it and then actually try it, try to apply it, and that helps it to be more concrete and to feel a little bit easier about what are we doing, how are we doing it. So I'm going to walk through in Excel how to calculate the cumulative frequency, relative frequency, percent, and percentile. And the video is pretty explicit about this, but learning how to do it in Excel can also be beneficial. So basically what I've done is I've taken the simple frequency, which I have noted here as N, and I've already put that information in and I just copied and pasted it from the PowerPoint that I had created. And so we have the heights in the most left-hand column, column A, of 60, 61, 62. We have the frequency for each of those heights. For the cumulative frequency, again, that's where we actually can start adding and doing things. So for the cumulative frequency, the very first one, again, is just the same as what it is because there's nothing else below it. If you wanted to be explicit, you could say this plus 0, because that's really what we're doing. We're saying there's nobody below this point. For the next one, it's going to be equal to whatever that frequency is plus everything that is less than that frequency. So at that point or below. And then once we calculate that, this basic format of add whatever is in the B column to whatever is in the C column, particularly the C column, the row above, together, that format works. So in the next cell, what we're going to do is add B4 plus C3, and then the one below that we'll add B5 plus C4. So we want to know whatever is to the left of this cell plus whatever came before it, whatever is above it. And so once we create that general format, we can grab this bottom corner here, and basically all this doing is copying and pasting. So I could copy this, I could just Control C, highlight these, Control V, it would work the same. But if you're in Excel, it's faster, it's easier to just do it this way. And so now I have the cumulative frequency of each of these scores or each of these heights. So 4 individuals are at 5 foot 1 inch or shorter. 8 individuals are at 5 foot 2 inches or shorter. And if I go down, there's 40 individuals total, assuming that I don't have anybody missing. And definitely there's 40 individuals that are represented that are at 5 foot 9 inches or 69 inches and shorter. For relative frequency, again, that statement was if you can divide, you can do relative frequency. So what we're going to do is the relative frequency is the simple frequency for this score, for this category, divided by the overall frequency, so little n divided by big N. Now, if I want to be able to drag down, what I can do is change this cell referencing. So what we're using right now is called dynamic cell referencing. So as I drag down, if you look in these cells over here, initially it was B3 plus C2. The next one, because I go down a cell, it changes when it copies and pastes, so each one goes down. So instead of B3, it's now B4, and instead of C2, it's now C3. The next one's the same way. It's going to increment by 1. So now it's B5 and C4. So I'm basically adding 1 to the rows as I move down the rows. And that's what I want to do for B, because I want to say what is the frequency, the occasion of 60 inches or 61 inches relative to the whole sample. So I want to go from 60 to 61 to 62. So I want it to go from B2 to B3 to B4. But I don't want this part to be dynamic because, again, big N, that 40, is the number of individuals in the whole sample, and that is true for everything. So that's going to be our denominator for everything. So we can put a $ in front of the 11. And what that does is, as we move down this column, every time that we move to the next row, it's going to stay on row 11 for everybody. Now, if I put a $ in front of C, what it would also mean is I could drag over to E and it would still stay on C11. We don't need that at this moment. I'm going to click enter. I'm going to scroll down. And what we see, we want to always double check when we do this. So I have two individuals at this height, 0.05. I have two individuals this height. 4 is easy, right? So 4 is 10% of 40, or 0.1 proportionally. So those are right. 6 is also correct. So we want to double check, especially the first time we use anything, make sure that it's correct. Now I can also say equals, and I could add them all together manually, or I can use the function sum. And so I can say sum together these proportions. And what I should see is, if I've done this correctly, that they sum to 1. They in fact do, which would suggest that we've probably done this correctly. Now, going from relative frequency to percent simply involves multiplying by 100. So I'm going to take this this relative frequency that we already have, I'm going to multiply, and you can just do Shift 8, or if you have a number sign, you can do the little asterisk that indicates that you want to multiply. So if I multiply by 100, I see that 5% of individuals have a height of 60 inches. And then I can go down. What I see from this is, yes, 0.05 goes to 5. And really all I'm doing is moving this decimal place 2 places to the right, because when I multiply by 100, that's basically what it does. When I check this, I can use sum again and say sum E2 to E11. I see that it's 100. That is what I would expect for it to be. And then for percentile, I can basically do a cumulative percent, or cumulative percentage. So what I'm going to do is say this first one just equals 5. And again, if you want to put plus 0, so you remember it's not just magically 5. It's everything at this score or below. There's just nothing below it. And then for the next one, I'm going to say that score plus whatever's below it. Well, there's nothing below it. And then I can copy and paste as we did before. And I see that when I get to the bottom, I get to 100, which would suggest that I've probably done this correct. As I said in the other video, it is possible that you get to 100 erroneously, but if you don't get to 100, you probably have done something wrong. Maybe it's a rounding error, maybe you miscalculated something. If you're doing the calculations in Excel, it can help alleviate the likelihood of some of those errors. And so this shows you how to do that process in Excel. We're also going to talk about how to do mean, median, and mode in Excel. So when we're looking at this, basically I have created the data a little bit differently. So before, I had a possible height and then the number of times that it occurs. For mean, median, mode to work correctly, I actually have to explicitly create that 62 times, the 61 2 times, 62 4 times. So that's really what I've done here, is I have 60 twice, I have 61 twice, 62 4 times. So it's the same data, just a different format that's more usable for Excel in this case. The first thing I'm going to do is sum x. So again, sigma x just tells me to add together, and we can use the sum function in order to do that. So we want to add together B2 to B41. So I've already shown you that you can scroll down a column. You can also just manually type in if you know the location. Of course, since you're just now seeing this data, I should double check that 41 is where the data ends. That's expected because there were 40. That was our total sample size, was 40. But I lose one row here because I have column labels up here at the top. So I go B2 to B41. That's still 40 people. When I do this, I see that the total heights of all the people, basically if I stack them on top of each other, they would be 2,600 inches tall. And then I can take the sample size. For sample size, I'm going to use count. We already know that it's 40. We've already seen that. But if I have missing data or something, I can check that by saying count B2 to B41. Are there any scores in that range missing? And what I see is that no, in this case, there are not. You can extend it beyond the end of your data, right? So if I forgot that there were only 41 people, I could say just be 100. I know I have less than 100. Well, what's going to happen to these cells? Is it going to count them? Is this function working the way we think it is? I see that basically as long as they are blank, it doesn't count them. Now, the way that this can be a problem is if you've totaled or done anything below where your data stops, as long as there's something in that cell, it's going to count that cell. So being more specific can be useful to avoid a potential error, but assuming that you don't have anything below where your data stops, it should not count those cells. And if one of these were missing, if this information was missing, it would then adjust and not count that either. Now, one way to calculate the mean is the sum of x divided by n. So I could just say take d1 or e1, divide that by e2. And I'm realizing that I must have moved things over after I made this. There we go. Same thing here. And same thing here. So I added in that A column so that we can number these here in a moment when we need to do the median. And I forgot to go back and adjust this. There we go. So now it's adjusted because our data is really in that B column. So that's one way to calculate the mean. And we do want to remember, where does the mean come from? What does the mean represent? That actually is important. However, once you get comfortable with this, you can also use built-in functions in order to make your life a little bit easier. So we can say average B2 to B41. And assuming we calculated our mean correctly, which we did, we should get the same thing. So both of these options are really calculating the same thing. Just one of them is doing it manually to remind you, where is this mean coming from? What does this average represent? And the second one is letting you get there a little more quickly. As we get to exams 2, exams 3, you may want to start using some of these. I would recommend not jumping to these shortcuts too quickly, because on the exam, I'll ask you conceptual questions about what happens if, there's an outlier or something like that. And understanding this piece of where is this coming from, what does this mean, what does this represent, can help you answer those questions more effectively. For the median again is the number that is in the middle position or the middle of your data. And in this case, the data are already sorted because I set them up to be lowest to highest. However, if they weren't sorted, I could highlight all my data. So I want to make sure I highlight all the columns where my data are, because I don't want them to get out of connection with each other. If I had height and weight, for instance, for a person, I wouldn't want to sort the height column without also sorting the weight column with it, because then the height and the weight for a person would no longer be aligned with each other on the same row. So to sort this, I'm going to go back to the Home tab. I'm going to go to Sort and Filter. I'm going to go to Custom Sort, and I'm going to say I want to sort on height. Again, this isn't going to do anything in my data because it's already sorted, but if it wasn't sorted, that is what you would do. To show you that it would do something, instead of smallest to largest, which is the way I would naturally think of it, I'm going to sort it largest to smallest, and you'll see that it just basically flips the order. And then I could sort it and move it back. So I can sort on height, and now I want to go back to the way I would naturally sort it, smallest to largest. So it's already sorted, so whatever the middle position is, that's what the median is. So to find the middle position, I'm going to take n, and n is right here. I'm going to add 1 to it, and I realize now my formula over there is incorrect. And then I'm going to divide by 2. So you add 1, not subtract 1. So we have 20.5 is our median position. Now the median itself is not the position, it's the score that is at that position. So to know where the 20th position is, the easy thing would be to number these in order. Since we don't already have an ID number, we can just add 1. And if you type the numbers 1 and 2, and then basically scroll down, hold that arrow and scroll down, it will assume that you want to keep numbering in order. If you just type the number 1, it thinks you want to repeat the number 1 over and over, but it's pretty intuitive. If it sees that there's a order or a pattern to things, it will try to continue that order. So now I look and I see, okay, it's 20.5. That's going to be between 20 and 21. In this case, they're equal, so that's easy. It's going to end up being 65. but ultimately what we're really doing is getting an average of these two. And to get an average of those, we can say take the score that's at the 20th position, add the score that's at the 21st position, and after you add those together, divide by 2. You'll see that I put that in parentheses because if I don't, order of operations is PEMDAS, right? Parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. So it would try to first divide whatever's in B22 by 2, and then add that quotient, whatever's the result of B22 divided by 2 to B21. We don't want that. We want to add B21 and B22 together and then divide by 2, which is why I put parentheses around the addition so that it does the addition first and then divides by 2. So that you can see that formula, I'm going to put a little apostrophe in front of it. And what that does is it basically, now the equal sign is not the first character, so it doesn't read it as a formula or a function anymore. So I can take that function though and also actually have it solve over here. So I'm highlighting everything but the little apostrophe there. I'm going to paste it in here, and not surprisingly, when you add 65 plus itself divided by 2, you end up with 65. But if it was such that the numbers weren't the same, this formula would be useful. Again, if there were an odd number to start with, we would actually end up with a perfect middle, and so it would just be the score that's at that point. So it'd actually be easier. You could just copy that score in or type that score in. If you want to calculate the median with a function, you can say what's the median of B2 to B41, assuming we've done this correctly, should be that you find it. To use this function in Excel, you don't actually have to sort them. Basically, Excel can do all the work for you. Again, that's useful in the long run. In the short term, if I ask you a question about what does the median represent, if you don't keep reminding yourself, oh, it's the middle score, it's the middle of the distribution when they are sorted, then when I ask you a conceptual question about it, you may struggle with it. So again, I want to give you these shortcuts, I want to give you these skills, but I don't want to do so and then have you use them all the way from now until the first exam, and then be surprised when I ask you a conceptual question that maybe using those the whole time impedes your ability to perform. So remember, it's a balancing act. It may take a little longer to do it the long way, but ultimately you're going to enhance your memory of what is this mean, what does this represent, conceptually what happens if I add another score or something like that, or take away a score. What's the impact of an outlier, for instance? Well, if I understand how the median is being done and how the mean's being done, I can conceptually wrap my head around, well, which one of these is going to move more, change more when I add a score, either that's really high or really low. And so knowing this approach, similar to knowing this approach to doing the mean, will help you with those conceptual options. But especially once we get past the first exam, then you may want to move to doing it this slightly quicker way. So for the mode, as I mentioned in the video, you can have multiple modes, and to make sure that we catch all the possible modes, we actually have to highlight multiple cells because we need one cell per possible mode. Now I'm going to only do 3, and we're going to see if I exhaust all the possible modes. So once I highlight multiple cells, I'm going to start typing my code, which is equals mode. There are a few. There's mode, which is an old one. There's mode.single. Both of those only return one number. What we need, in case there are multiple modes, there's multiple scores, heights that are occurring with the same frequency, is mode.mult. Then the range that I want to know, so I'm looking for the mode of the heights. The heights are in B2 to B41. And this is different because this is going to create an array in those 3 cells. Instead of just hitting enter like I did for the other ones, I need to hit Control Shift Enter, and now I find that I have at least 3 modes: 64, 65, 68. The problem is I'm not sure that that's all the modes, because maybe there's 4 modes. So to address that problem, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this code so that I can give it to you as an example. I'm going to put that over here. I'm also going to write you a reminder that it's Control, Shift, and Enter because we're creating an array. And then I'm going to highlight this and delete the whole array. As you noticed, I got an error message because I was working in one of the cells to copy it. You can't change one cell. You have to change the whole array. Now I'm going to highlight, let's say, what's that, 6, 7 cells, just to make sure that I catch all the possible modes. I'm going to say equals mode.mult. So it's basically the same process. I've just highlighted multiple cells. I'm looking at B2 through B41 still. I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and Enter again. And I find out, in fact, I actually did have all of the possible modes. I had all 3 of them, 64, 65, 68. And I get these NAs because I don't need more cells than that. And so if that bugs you, you can always go back, change the array, only do 3 cells. But again, you have to do enough that you see 64, 65, 68, and that I've exhausted them all, because it's possible there's one other height that has the same frequency as those 3. Hopefully this helps you understand what we're doing, how we're doing it. Again, if you need to ask questions, please use the discussion boards. Feel free to post questions, ask for clarification. If you have insights, also post those there, because it can help your fellow peers. They may go to study for the exam, maybe somebody procrastinated, maybe they had to work late, they didn't have time to ask the question, and they're now working through the exam. I'm not sitting there 24/7 trying to answer questions. I try once or twice a day to check those, but it could take too long. Maybe they don't have time to wait for an answer. But if you asked a similar question, maybe your insights or maybe the answer to the question that you ask could help them. So feel free to post insights that you've had. I may comment and tweak them if I think that your insight needs to be worded a little bit better, or if I think that you're generalizing too much, like you noticed something, but maybe it doesn't mean quite what you thought it meant, which also can be helpful in allowing me to help you understand. So if I see something, I'm like, oh, that's not quite what that means. That's not quite what you're thinking it is. I can also do that. So it's not just for questions. Post comments, insights, those things is there, and I'll try to reply and answer to all of them. Thank you very much for your time.